Business is next to love. It is the creator and preserver of human civilization. And Majid, that was the day that I got my bulbs on and I realized that that's exactly what I mean by when I want to work with human beings.
Welcome back to this week's episode of The Executives, the show where we navigate the intricate world of executive leadership, exploring strategies, insights, and personal stories of successful professionals shaping the global business landscape. I'm your host Majid, and joining us today is Yash Ranga. Yash, Director of Partnership and Innovation at PYXERA Global, drives impact in 100 plus countries by fostering multi stakeholder partnerships. Formerly, he was leading the Jaipur Rugs Foundation. He empowered 40,000 artisans globally and has worked with Silicon Valley firms. Yash co founded the Global Conscious Luxury Movement and has advised global initiatives like 1x1 and is a sought after speaker at platforms like the UN. With accolades such as an HBS scholarship and Codes Fellowship, he balances expertise in socio-economic transformation with passions for boxing and theatre. Let us welcome यश आदाब और आपका द एग्जीक्यूटिव्स की पॉडकास्ट में खुश आमदीद.
Shukriya, Majid. It's a pleasure to be here.
Before we talk about the serious topic, I really tried to do justice, basically trying to introduce you. But when I was reading and through your profile and making basically a shorter version of the introduction, I was really struggling. What should I keep? What should I remove? So maybe I would let you like tell us more about who is Yash.
I have a very interesting journey with training in software engineering and MBA, but then my entrepreneurial spirit always wanted me to go to my quest to work with people. And that's how right after my engineering I started an education consulting firm in Rajasthan in India to work with academicians, schools, and kids, students, basically in the commerce background, and how do you build them ready for the future career. So that's where I really was super successful in running that venture. It was called FCA Private Limited, and FCA acronym means also fellow chartered accountant. So once a chartered accountant, a financial expert, finishes 5 years of his work, he becomes FCA. So how I enable the younger leadership, younger generation to see the future while they were training, prepping themselves for the future. And from there, I just realized that it's time for me to add sophistication to my academics. And I got into MBA. And from my MBA, I realized that I really need to enter in the world of corporates and the world of communities. So both for me goes parallel, and that's how I started a initial career in tech industry, where my job was to make people not to believe on their hearts, but to believe on AI, ML, predictive analytics. And I'm talking about like a couple of years ago now, when AI and predictive analytics were like in their super nascent form, but they were really heavily invested for where we are today. So I saw that transition, but somehow my core has always been to follow my own instincts. And then I was in an industry which was extremely fruitful, I would say extremely well paying, but somehow I was not able to bring my intuitions to my leadership, to my work. And same I was not doing for my community. Like I was asking people just to believe on our tools, nothing else. And that's what really gave me a big U-turn to think, go back, did my inner engineering, and realize who I am, what is my purpose on this planet, and why I am here. So that's when I started questioning more of my why. And I would say on a business trip, on a tech business development trip in India, I somehow ended up at a ashram and decided to leave my job in tech and just to go in a inner engineering journey for a few months. And that's where I realized that I am not made to work with and for machines. I am made to work with human beings. I need to invest nurture into the human potential, and that's how we unlock the untapped opportunities in the world for everyone. So that's how my career into social enterprises and social businesses then started. Because one during my journey to learn about what my where my skill sets can be well positioned, I met this amazing founder of Jaipur Rugs called NK Chaudhary. And I asked him a very simple question that at that point of time I was asking everyone, because I was not content with what I read, what I saw, what I experienced about capitalism. So my first innocent question was, how do you define business? And I told him that, sir, please don't give me any bookish language of the business, because that's what I've been doing for last 6 years, doing that research. And he said, Yash, I can't give you any bookish because I was not privileged like you to go to the best schools in the country. I can give you my experiential definition, what I have lived for 40 years. And he said, yes, business is next to love. It is the creator and preserver of human civilization. And Majid, that was the day that I got my bulbs on, and I realized that that's exactly what I mean by when I want to work with human beings. Because how do you combine the power of love in the business and make business as an agent of world benefit? So that was the first big U-turn that started my career from tech to social businesses, where I was working with these impoverished communities in 600 villages of India, and then we expanded globally. And my whole idea was, how do you connect the world beyond borders, which is purely based on potential. So that has been an incredible experience at Jaipur Rugs. I did a long stint there, and I always built in this innovation angle to everything I do because of my tech background. And I did a lot of social innovation on grounds in luxury industry, bringing in technology in craft sector, in unorganized sector, and how do you make these sectors transform. So that has been my journey. And in my current role, again, it's post COVID, it started. And I had COVID during the second wave, and I was in ICU for 23 days. That was my second big U-turn, because I have been spending a long career in conscious luxury industry. But then I realized, while I was in ICU, I saw the state of the world. I saw the state when, for the first time, world saw that private sector government system got fractured. And that's when people started cooperating with each other, coming together and supporting each other to come out of pandemic. That's how I got a bed in the ICU, because that was the black day, maximum number of deaths, no oxygen, no beds in hospitals. And that's when I survived. So that's when I really realized that world is grappling through the growing social, economical, cultural, environmental challenges that we face as humanity. That was my second, bulb moment. And that's what got me into my new role at PYXERA Global.
What exactly does Pixera do? If you were to give an elevator pitch, less than 30 seconds.
So, PYXERA Global is a non-profit. It's based out of Washington, D.C. PYXERA Global brings the best of business and community to solve the world's most pressing problems. To give you one example, what PYXERA Global will do is, PYXERA Global will bring intellectual as well as financial capital from private sector, from government sector, into the communities to help them address their growth challenges.
Cool. No, that's really, really cool. I mean, and we need that, right? I mean, companies are trying to do something, but the thing is, they don't have experts on how can they make an impact. Also, like if I see startups, they have raised money, but they are not experts in how can they make an impact. So we definitely need NGOs who can actually come in and help, for example, businesses improve as well. Like I know that there used to be one. It's very small. It was an NGO in Germany. They were basically teaching restaurants how you can actually save food. Like how can you prevent wastage of food. And I remember I went to one of the restaurants they actually consulted. There was like a rule. It was an all you can eat buffet. The restaurant owners were super nice, and they had only one rule: do not waste food. If you do, we will measure the every plate how much you weigh, and you would end up paying, I think, like 4 euros per 100 gram.
Incredible.
And it was written everywhere. So it was written where you were taking food, it was written on your table, it was literally written on your table in front of you, so you would not miss that. And I remember I was eating, and then I saw a lady was yelling, and I turned around to see what's happening, and she was like, "Yeah, it's all you can eat. It should be, it should be okay with you." He's like, "No, I don't have a problem if you take 200 times. You can go help yourself, take food 200 times. No one will question you anything. But our policy is we don't appreciate or acknowledge people wasting food. And you basically ended up wasting 3 plates of food. And I remember she had to pay more than like 60 euros on a buffet which cost like 20 euros.
Wow.
So
Wow. That's is mind-boggling, and I think that's exactly what I would say everyone in the leadership positions needs to think, because almost half, 47% of the world population now is living in less than $7 a day, and still we don't appreciate how much of that small change can bring the transformation in lives of people who don't have even one meal a day to get fed.
That's very true. I mean, and I mean, we definitely need individuals and also entities like Pixera, which actually help, right? But before we jump into the serious topic, I was thinking what should be a question that I should ask you as in terms of fun, because I want to show people that we are serious people, but we also know how to have fun. So the question I have is, if you were in charge of naming a new planet, let's say NASA discovered a new planet and they said, you know what, yes, you're the one who's going to actually pick the name for it. What would you call it? There's a condition. You cannot call it with your name.
I will call it Jiva,
Jiva.
Jiva, which means the origin of everything.
Okay. Jiva. Is it like Hindi or is it like Sanskrit?
So Jiva is basically its roots from Sanskrit. It's a Hindi word, and we also did a lot of work. I will share as we work on community development, on regeneration and equitable community transformation. So to have a place of future, we need to have roots, and the roots give birth to livelihoods, economic opportunities. So that's what the planet I always dream of. It should be equitable, regenerative, and transformative. So that's why Jiva, the source of equitable, regenerative transformation, is Jiva.
No, that's a cool name. I mean, it regeneration. Interesting. I mean, I was thinking you might pick something like your own or someone else's name, but that's a cool name. I mean, you got me off guard there. I wanted to catch you off guard, but you got me off guard. But that's all good. Well, thank you. But the topic that we have for discussion today is basically strategic innovation and impact, driving leadership, CSR, and stakeholder engagement. It's a big topic. I mean, we have questions and we have some prepared. We will try to cover as much as we can, but it's a huge topic, and we need to talk more and more about things like this. But would love to understand, because you touched upon briefly, right, that you basically transition from software towards technology, from technology towards more non-profit, strategy, innovation, and so on. Let's dig deep into that. Like, what was your inspiration that basically you ended up in the ashram, and then from there you uh, took what you took?
So, Majid, I always believe in the transformative power of businesses. And as I told you, I was always curious about entrepreneurial energy. And more than entrepreneurship, that energy always inspired me. And I think that has always been my inspiration. And the reason what I felt was I was not able to do is to bring in the innovation from the people side, the human potential side, because again, like tech industry is a mature industry, and you have specific areas and technologies you work in. So there is a very specific kind of innovation that is required there from the developers and the strategists of the tech industry. But I always felt that people in the world, as I said, half of the world population still lives under $7 a day. And what kind of innovations, strategies, and leaderships are required to bring in transformation in that population of the world that doesn't have access, that doesn't have resources, and that doesn't have that support system, ecosystem to help nurture that potential. So I think that was my quest always. And I was always researching, like the capitalism was always been perceived since 70s that it is all for maximizing shareholders value. and somehow it never felt right with my understanding of the power of businesses. So I always felt that how do you bring in that transformative power of business, that heroic spirit that brings a win-win-win for all, a win for community, a win for corporation, and a win for the environment that we live in. Because right now the world is grappling through the growing environmental crisis, and this has all because of the unrampant use of the resources that we take from our planet, but we didn't think in a regenerative way that what are we putting back in. Even with AI right now, technology, I'm not worried about how it will uproot cultures, but what I'm worried about is the use of energy. Because right now in Valley, I was just recently in Silicon Valley with the stack leaders, and they were now all investing in nuclear reactors for their energies to run their AI. So that's
Mm.
my where my brain doesn't fit well, that the resources that you take from planet, how are you either making them more regenerative, or how you are investing back into the planet. And that's why I love your question, because it's not far when we need another planet to take care of our population which is on this earth and the coming population.
I mean, and energy is one part, right? Like I know, like some companies are trying to do like renewable energy, but like for example, in Germany, they're pushing solar massively, right? So they're trying to install
Yeah,
solar on every single roof. Some states have already said if you're building a new building, you have to have solar on the top. But
yeah,
Germany, when I compare it to India, Pakistan, for example, the solar production is much lower because they have less sun as compared to Pakistan or India. And when you go, for example, where I live in Pakistan, if you go on the top, you see most of the houses already have solar, which
yeah,
means that the people are accepting it, right? But then comes food, for example. Then there are, how do you grow food so drastically, so quickly that people are able to also like eat, and then how do you
yeah.
ensure that they are still with ethical practices, how a business is still doing like business properly without actually being fair, so to say, and not abusing the whole system, right? And I think it is
Yeah.
very important that we need to actually strategize and also innovate at the same time, right? But innovation
Exactly.
has cost as well. So I think the whole point of research and again NGOs Pixera actually help us, right, with that. But now from here, would love to understand, because you stepped right. I've been seeing a lot of YouTube videos because they always say you have success is not immediately. There is no shortcut to success, and I think your career or your journey shows that, right? So, and in your process, you actually had some milestones as well that basically shaped how you approach leadership or strategy, so to say. So can you share some of those milestones that you had, for example, in your career?
I would say the first milestone that was super, you know, that has a big impact in my current leadership was how I see the world while I was doing a project in a state called Bihar in India. And that state has the highest poverty index in the country, and almost like compared to many other cities in the world, that is a very like poverty driven state. And that was my first introduction to how do you go into a state, work with the government, work with the local ecosystem, and bring in about a transformative entrepreneurial ecosystem that provides livelihoods at the most marginalized communities. And at the time where when I entered that, it also had a lot of local insurgency. So it was a very classic situation where I was first time felt trapped, because again I was not trained to do that kind of work. And then I realized that the only way to make this work for the communities, for our organization, and for the stakeholders that we will be working with was to first understand the dynamics as it is, without any of my preconceived notion about Bihar, or my preconceived notion about the work culture, work dynamics in that state. So I think that was that big milestone that really framed the way I took leadership. I took working with the cross sectoral teams, and I really started listening to people and giving more focus to their wisdom rather than the knowledge that I was bringing in with my role in that particular geography. And I would say it took me some time to get to that dynamics, but Majid, that was one of the most successful projects where in the most abject poverty ridden part of that state, we were able to create 6,000 women entrepreneurs. And those 6,000 women entrepreneurs contributed to the total new economy in those villages where there was this integration with the global market demand and a new skill set that they learned, and they created an entire industry within those communities. So I think that milestone really had a big impression on me, because what I learned was in the most difficult perceived, so they are perceived as difficult areas or subjects or terrains to work in, but technically it is all about how do you balance human beings, how do you bring in their voices that enables you to take those right decisions. So I think that has been a biggest milestone that really gave me that confidence to enter into a new territory which I am totally not aware of in terms of culture, in terms of the local ecosystem, in terms of the local economy and how things work. But I think that enables you to see the world from totality, right? Not just from one lens that you enter in. So that's one major milestone. But second major milestone, I would say, started with when I was on a panel, and one of these gentlemen on the panel was the Director General of Police prison system of one of the states in India, and he talked about the potential of life-term imprisoned prisoners in the jail system. And for me, that was a completely new terminology, because I never had any experience or exposure of what that jail systems looks like. But then when he took me, he gave me the complete exposure to that. I said, "Sir, I think these jails are the future WeWorks of creative industries." And he said, "Yes, I don't understand what is WeWorks," because again, it was for him a totally different subject. But then when we started working in those jails prison system, we were able to bring the best of creativity and art that the luxury industry had never seen. And those pieces that were
Mhm.
being made and designed by these life prison inmates completely transcended this whole idea of design beyond these boundaries and borders of the jail system. And that really got me the insight that when you really see world from the lens of potential, you bring the best out even from the most difficult subjects that people find it difficult to connect. And now in the luxury market, these jails are giving the most luxurious handmade home decors that world is accepting because of the stories that comes with them. So I think these are two major milestones that I felt that built my leadership, that built the way I look at multi-stakeholder engagement, I look at strategy, and that's what I look at innovation as basically.
Mhm. I mean, let's take the first example about the 6,000 women entrepreneurs. When you started out, right? Because I think there are lessons also. There are things people even working in corporate can take from this, because there is an objective, there's a result, and then at the end of the day, you measure it, right? So when
Yeah.
you said 6,000 women became entrepreneurs, I'm just doing rough maths on the top of my head. If they generate €1,000, $1,000 yearly, so 6,000 into 1,000 becomes approximately $6 million of gross domestic product, right? So GDP income for the country, correct? So when you started this project, did you initially have this thought that you would have 6,000, or was it less, or how was it like? When did you start? When you started, because you said you listened, and then probably you adapted your goal, right? And then eventually from there you went in and you changed, and then saw.
So while we were doing our scoping in those villages, what I felt was there was a dire hunger and need for people to work, because the only thing that they had was working on these menial jobs on contract farming. It was not their land because they don't own any land. They was working like in very difficult situations, and then that work was also not 8 hours of work every day. So my basic math that I was seeing there, that there is a captive audience who can be trained, skilled, build their leadership and entrepreneurial skills, and can be translated to local entrepreneurs. And then you bring these global opportunities to their doorsteps, and you create the bridge between the demand and supply. So that's basically where, as any other business, we saw the business opportunity, we saw the input, the required amount of input that can produce the required amount of output that would suffice the global demand of the products basically that we were dealing in. So we were dealing in home decor,
Mm.
rugs, carpets, and all that kind of products. So that's how we saw that, and we almost shortlisted, I guess, some 76 villages, and from those 76 villages we were able to survey and did a baseline for around uh, four times, like 24,000 people. And with that very in-depth baseline survey of 24,000 people, we were able to get to a point that we could work with one fourth, of them as entrepreneurs who create more opportunities. So I'm only talking about the people who I was able to reach out with my intervention, but then the ripple effect of that intervention even now is much bigger.
Mm. No, the ripple effect is, I think, what you did, 6,000, even one fourth of uh, a particular segment, right? Like when I look at my MBA class, we are talking MBA, so people who actually studied global management and innovation. When I see how many of them are actually doing business, maybe it would be less than 2%, because it's not many people. Not everyone wants to become an entrepreneur, right? So if you did 25% just from one lot, that's massive. That's a huge number. I'm very, very happy to hear that. I mean, many congratulations on that. It's amazing. And then you mentioned about the ripple effect, so which brings me, like, do you still see what are the ripple effects afterwards, like for example what is happening now, because of that initiative you took? Or was it like you did it and then you guys were out? Maybe not, you're not involved directly, but the entity is still involved there.
See, technically, that should be ideally the role of any social enterprise or a development organization, that you go to a community, you create an ecosystem, you create the environment, and you bring in all the nurturing elements to that environment to for it to be sustainable and for that environment to take ownership by itself. So we did their work for almost 6 years, and post 6 years, we created that entire local ecosystem that even now exists in different ways. And they had created even more opportunities because we were able to only go with their one skill set, one trade. But with that framework, they were able to create even more different job opportunities, more different kind of local businesses. So now, when I read sometimes about that region, they are doing a lot of innovation in agriculture. So a lot of organic vegetable businesses are coming from that region. They are doing a lot of work with their local cultural, like paintings. It's the art forms from that region. So that's how they are building more on what we just set as a launching pad for them to understand that they are reservoir of untapped potential. Once they know that they are reservoir of untapped potential, it's just for them to go deeper and build that. And then the government, private sector, NGOs provide that nurturing support continuously through CSR, through philanthropy, through other government schemes, for them to continue to evolve that ecosystem and local economies in those areas.
I mean, like, when, for example, I launched my first project, I was happy. Yes, I did it. I first project launched, but I have a feeling that when you, for example, the 6,000 women launched their businesses, the feeling would not be the same, right? It's not the same like a corporate. Yes, yay, we did like 10 million euros of revenue or something like that, 20 million, 50 million, I don't know, but I have a feeling that it would not be the same. Like when the feeling of success, in a social cause would be much different. You will feel more accomplished. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's just my feeling.
I would say definitely it's fulfilling. It gives you that sense of purpose. But I would say that makes me even more sensitive to the fact that I'm just working with not even a drop in the ocean, like 2.7 billion people in the world needs that opportunities. So that keeps me, my organization, all the time on our foot to go into different territories, bring different partnerships, create more collaborations to get those kind of opportunities in the areas that they need, because see, world with that, I would say, sophisticated growth in the business and the human growth index that we all see in the world has progressed, but still 2.7 billion people out of 8.2 billion people are living in abject poverty. So I always challenge,
Mm,
has business been able to do their actual job that they were supposed to do or they are supposed to do?
mm. I mean, and when you say like poverty, we are not talking about $100 a day. We are talking literally they cannot even afford 3 meals a day,
Exactly. Exactly.
and that's
And then
that's
on the
mm.
other hand, we
And
feel
then
good by accomplishing a project or launching a new product or a new service that has X percentage of market share, and we feel so good. That's the breakthrough we brought. But imagine we are not able to address the basic human dignity that we deserve: 3 meals a day and a roof over our head and some clothes to wear.
I think it's there are two things, right? To this, the first one is like not everyone understands like what is happening. I mean, for example, I come from Pakistan, right? So Pakistan is also not super developed. So I have seen some regions really backwards, like extremely backwards. But
Yeah,
then I see them, I'm like, yeah, they have some problems. But then, for example, I had friends who actually were working in telco sector, and they would mention that they went even in areas which were even worse than those, and I was surprised, like I
yeah,
was shocked, like no electricity at all, no service,
yeah,
nothing, because they said should they feed themselves or should they get electricity. So if you give them a choice, they say, you know what, no, we're not interested in electricity, we can work with candles, but we need food. That's the most
yeah,
important thing for human beings. I mean, it is right, it is like you need to feed yourself. Clean water, for example,
yeah,
in my
yeah,
city, Lahore, you cannot drink water from the tap. Like I live in Germany, right? So
yeah,
here I just open up the tap, drink the water. It's okay. It's a little bit hard in terms of calcium, but not dirty necessarily. But if I look at
yeah,
Lahore, for example, we have a major problem. I think in India was like the AQI of Delhi was like 400, and I just read like a
yeah,
few weeks ago or something, the AQI of Lahore was over 1,000, which is basically poisonous, and Multan was over 2,000.
yeah.
So imagine people are living
My
there
goodness.
and they are like living normal lives. I mean, imagine what would it do to the lungs of the people. So I think we definitely need more initiatives like this, and also like socio environment caring initiatives as well, right? But now coming back towards more the topic of what we have is like, I have a question about how has your experience in basically leading cross-functional and cross-cultural teams, because I perceive that when you were managing this project with the jail, or for example when you were managing the project with the women entrepreneurs, you worked with not only cross-functional but also cross-sector, like governments would be involved, banks would be involved, private sector would be involved, so it's a lot of people involved. So, how has your experience in basically leading cross-functional and cross-cultural team influenced your strategic decisions? Because it's I see it as very complex.
So it's a very complex, solvable problem. That's why we as an organization intervene in those areas. Why we consider them as solvable problems, because we know different set of stakeholders who have different stakes and interests. But if you bring them together with the common purpose on the table and create that environment where they can achieve their individual organizational objectives, but also collectively the bigger purpose for which we need this multifunctional, multicultural, cross-functional teams. So the first most important thing is that you really need to be flexible, because with different expertise, with different contexts, with different cultures, there are a lot of different kind of energies that are coming into the program at the same time. So the most important thing is that you really need to be super flexible throughout the process. And then you need to have a lot of space for failures, because these kind of designs or strategies are not all designs fit all to win, because you have to have the bandwidth to be able to be very comfortable with losses, with failures, and with that comes a lot of learning. So I think that most important, flexibility gives a chance for people to come up with their voices. So we need to give space for every stakeholder to bring on their voice so that they feel heard. And then how do you weave different voices in a common purpose, basically? So I think flexibility, giving that voice is most important thing. But third most important thing when it comes to sustainability is that you have to stop and listen, because things change so drastically, so quickly, that if you continue to work on an autopilot strategy, once you find, one element of it works, people are working together, they're aligned well, and you just go to autopilot mode, it's a success sure recipe for failure. So you really need to do course correction from time to time, intervene, stop, listen, adapt as per the changing dynamics. I think these are few critical things to keep in mind when you look from for or while you work with cross-functional and cross-cultural teams.
That's very true. I mean, it's a lot of learning. I think it's not only for NGOs, but also it can be applied to corporates and also small and medium businesses. And now would love to understand that. Can you share an example of an innovative strategy that you actually implemented, for example, that significantly impacted the organization or let's say the community? You already gave two examples, right? But let's look at another example that you did, which also had a massive scale, right, of impact.
So I would love to go back to my example of the name that you asked me for, another planet, Jiva. So basically, Jiva is one of the projects that PYXERA Global did in Rajasthan with the smallholder farmers. So with this terrible impact of climate, irregular rains, the smallholder farmers are really impacted most, and that leads to a lot of farmer suicides. That's also true in many parts of the world. So what we saw as a solvable problem is that if you bring the private sector, if you bring the local farming community as well as the academia together to invest more in research and to bring more entrepreneurial approach from the private sector, and you just make them work together, we can actually help solve the problem of these low income farmers with very limited amount of land by basically maximizing the yield from their land. So this project was called Jiva, and the acronym JIVA stands for Joint Initiative for Village Advancement. So basic objective is how do you advance a village sustainability with multi stakeholders. So we brought in one of the Fortune 100 companies who is into tractors, and one we brought in the local agricultural universities, and we realized that what is the farming pattern, the cropping pattern currently of these farmers. If we can bring in some alignment in that, can we increase their annual income? That was the very simple hypothesis that we played with. Given all the limitations of the drought, the less rainfall, the less access to water and all, how do you work it out? So basically what we were able to do, we were able to find some farming techniques and bringing in different, kind of fruits that give a higher yield and that gives higher rate for their produce. And basically this project we started in three villages initially with couple of hundred of farmers. Then we expanded these villages to almost 40 villages, 33,000 farmers. And this project got 2020 Ideas Changing the World Award, Fast Companies Ideas Changing the World. So this is for the first time we created a case study of how we bring in the best of the private sector with their technical competences, with their intellectual skill sets, technological skill sets, bring it to the local context of the community. and bring both the community interest as well as the employee interest of a corporation to come together. And this project really has been one of the most successful public-private social sector partnerships that brought in this huge tangible impact in the lives of not only the farmers of today, but we heavily invested in the education system so that we also build the farmers of tomorrow. And then post COVID, we were invited in Nigeria to basically contextualize this project in Nigeria's context post COVID. And we this year, I guess, we will be finishing the seventh year and culminating this project in Nigeria. And in Nigeria, this project is called as Reyuwa. So again, working with 40,000 small landholder farmers to improve their livelihoods, but also develop them for the climate smart agricultural practices, more agripreneurship, as well as more investment in education system in the government schools, so that the farmers of tomorrow, the younger generations, are more committed to their land rather than telling their families to sell the land and go out and migrate to some other place.
Mm. I mean, like you just mentioned 33 villages, 40,000 40,000 farmers, more or less, right? Um, just to give context for our listeners, maybe India is one of the largest exporters of a lot of vegetables and fruits, right? So, do we have a number? Do you know a number as a matter of fact? Like, what is the whole agriculture, of India? Because we all know that agriculture is the cornerstone of America or Pakistan or India. But in Pakistan and India, it's much more, like evident, so to say. And we export a lot of vegetables and fruits. So do you know, like, do you have a number of how much is the total export or something that actually gives our listeners a context, like what we are, why is this important? Why is Yash actually doing something like this?
So I can give you a exact cumulative number of what is the total agricultural exports from India, but I can give you a context in terms of the population. So the more than 60% of the population of India is engaged in agricultural value chain for their lives and livelihoods. That tells about the massiveness of the sector and the produce that leads to make India one of the largest exporter in a lot of farm related products.
So that's more than 600 million people involved, more or less.
Exactly.
Like India is what, like 1.2, 1.3 billion, so 650, let's say about 700 million, 700, 800. Oh, damn, that's a lot of people. I knew
Exactly.
it's huge, and but that's even more big. That's approximately the sizes of 10 Germany, like Germany has a population of
Yeah.
85 million. So basically, we are saying 10 Germany basically just doing only agriculture, nothing else.
Only agriculture. Exactly.
That's a huge number. I didn't know this.
And even to put into the context, so this is we are talking about scope. Now imagine the impact of climate change on the 60% of population of India's who are totally dependent on their entire lives income from agriculture, what climate can lead to. So that's why we make it as a solvable problem to bring in different stakeholders to able to go, because we are not talking about today or 20 years from now, we are talking about the future of our planet, because we are taking from the same land, and that also disturbs the quality of soil, the quality of land. So at the same time, while you are taking the produce, how do you make the quality of soil, quality of land more regenerative so it is suitable for years to come?
Hmm. And also considering that our population in general across the globe is increasing massively, right? So we need to cater to the needs of food to
Exactly.
other countries and other people as well. I mean, this is massive. Like when you do the math, it basically becomes way too much, like way too much.
Imagine Ukraine is a small country in terms of the global population, but just the disruption because of the war led to disruption in the food supply chain entirely all over the world. So that's what
Mhm.
interdependencies are, and the way world is changing. How do you make communities more self-sufficient, more regenerative, so in case of the global supply chain disruptions, we can still able to feed our population and able to take care of our feedstock and
Mm.
animals.
And just for context, we are not talking anything technology here. We are just talking simple things, basically just empowering more. I don't think that you would be giving the farmers a tablet. Hey, you know what? From now on, you're going to start watering according to this tablet, the software that we are telling you. You know, it's not that, right? It's basically you're educating them with their resources that they have, and you cannot expect them that they will suddenly learn how to become tech savvy or something, or start using AI as a matter of fact. So what you guys are doing is essentially you're basically empowering people without hardcore technology. I mean, I know some people might be like, why not put technology in? But we are talking about people who are not tech savvy. We need to take one step at a time, right? We cannot just give them complicated softwares, tablets, phones, augmented hardware, and tell them, you know what, from now on, you use this and your production will be 10x better. Doesn't work like that. We are talking about the people who are not highly
But
educated. So even educating them is the first good step, right?
I have a good news for tech people also, Majid, because again, right now we cannot exist in silos in any sector when it comes to sustainable transformation. Technology has a very integral role everywhere. So even in India right now, what we are piloting, not as Pixar Global, but some really cool interventions that I'm seeing is that because of climate change, the system is helping the farmers learn how to play work with drones and help
Hmm.
them to use the data that they are able to collect with the drones and put that it with AI and able to plan their farming pattern in a way that they can still be more viable and sustainable with the growing challenges of the face. So farmers are now playing with drones in India. They are being trained, they are being exposed to that. But again, you rightly said they are not educated, they are not well, I would say, exposed to what can technology play in helping them elevating their challenges. But again, that's exactly where the role of private sector, the role of technology industry, the role of government is how do you bring in that basic access to education about technology in very hands-on way for these communities to be able to look at these technologies for future to be adopted and be able to implement it in their context.
Now you mentioned a few stakeholders, government, private entities, and so on, and would love to understand, for example, because without these entities, right, you also mentioned that it would be hard to do these projects because of funding and so on. But would love to hear an example or discuss a project where stakeholder engagement actually played an essential role in its success. Like how did they end up contributing?
So I can share a project we did in Ghana, and so I was being invited to Ghana to understand the export potential of the Ghanaian economy, and I was made to travel to different villages in Ghana, and I saw that in the rural villages, the only work after agriculture, and that too they are not, I would say, very blessed with very high export potential of agriculture enough for their local consumption. They are doing a lot of weaving there. So the government was interested to understand that how can they expand their exports through their weaving communities, because more than 2.5 million people were just involved in one specific kind of weaving that could be contextualized in the present fashion industry and create a big market for them. And so when we went there, I was just looking it from a very outsider lens that one, there is a captive, the same example that I gave you for our work in Bihar. I just saw that there is a huge amount of working people who can be able to produce a product, a service that can be of global interest as per the global needs of the fashion and home decor industry. So basically, what we did is we bring in some private sector people, we bring in multilateral organizations like the U.S. Africa Development Foundation, who put in capital to create those business models there, and then we brought in the technological supports from some of the largest tech corporations of the world. We brought in some fashion designers from fashion industry and from the universities in New York, like the Fashion Institute of Technology, Savannah College of Art and Design, and we created that group of people who came together to create that prototype of that project, which we call as Thai Global Artisans. And you must have heard about Thai in tech. So TIE is the largest network of tech investors and tech professionals all around the world, basically started from Silicon Valley. But our objective of this TIE Global Artisans was T stands for traditions, I stands for innovation, and E stands for entrepreneurship. How do you leverage your traditional know-hows, couple it with innovation and entrepreneurship to create economic opportunities for the community? So that's one of the classic example that was also featured at the UN last year at the UN Conscious Lifestyle Network, how the global goals are being achieved through the Thai Global Artisans Project in Ghana.
These projects, they have involvement from a lot of stakeholders, then you have a lot of planning involved, and then you have a lot of challenges as well, right? Because these are not like any software projects are easy, right? I mean, yes, you have challenges, but maximum, the worst case would be you have a regulatory challenge, which is documented. Normally, if the state says you have to do things in a particular manner, they have certain expectations, fulfill those, get the approval, move forward, right? But I have a feeling, or my inner feeling says that the challenges that you would be seeing, for example, would be much more different. I mean, you have solved them before, right? You would love to understand what were the challenges that you have been facing, like for example, when you're trying to do something for the community, but also involving private industries and so on, because it's not an all happy flow, right? It's not all happy, it is going to have issues.
You are absolutely right. When different brains are involved, it becomes complex. And I think with this complexity comes the whole idea that everybody comes with their own subconscious biases, with their own cultural biases. But that's exactly what our job is, to basically create that fifth space, that neutral space where you suspend your subconscious biases, you suspend your cultural biases, you really have a very clear, defined goals that this is what is the big outcome if you all work together. And then it's not just that they have to completely suspend it. They can continue to keep their comfort in a way, but not at the cost of the goals and objectives. Same like in any other tech projects. At one of the levels, if one of the teams has not been able to feed in the entire stock that is required by other teams to get the entire software or entire product ready, we just fix it with that particular group of people or with that particular group of team, right? So what we have been same doing that same process is that at all the time we make sure that we encourage the partners to look at the bigger picture. We really bring a culture that is most important part in any of these kind of systemic change projects. You really need to have a conscious culture where everybody is seen, heard, everybody feels felt, they are felt, heard, seen. And in corporates we call this as DEI, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion, and all of that stuff. So by design we create those conscious culture with a lot of stakeholder integration as well, because if we don't integrate it, then we are not able to take that bigger picture on ground and make it executable. So I think these are a couple of challenges, but the way you deal with these challenges is important and makes these things more practically viable otherwise.
I mean, because challenges sometimes are solvable, and sometimes, especially when you're trying to make drastic changes, right, they are not appreciated by the people or by the stakeholders involved there, like because they don't see an advantage for them. So there are also forces, let's say, which don't want it to go as you want it, which is, I wouldn't be surprised
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
had that before. And would love to also see, like, understand that. Can you share maybe a time where you had this, for example, an initiative, you started it, and then you ended up with, can be anything, it can be a natural disaster as well, right? I mean, or something that stakeholders were not aligned and you decided to say that this project is not working, or how did you basically navigate that situation and make it that everyone becomes happy? Because from challenges you need to think of solutions, right?
So I think most important thing is that you have to be really open and able to encourage failures when it comes to projects like this. But I can give you a fresh example that I'm currently working on, and I would not name the communities and partners because of the nature of sensitivity of the subject. But when we started a project for a particular community in waste management, we have complete support from the local government, the state government, and everything to do, because that is the biggest subject to for them to work on. How do you manage the entire waste of your state, basically, and when we started, like 5 months down the line, when things are falling in place, we are developing our relationship with the communities and other stakeholders. A law changes, and a law changes which totally impacts the stability of the community that we are working with in that geography. So now this whole geopolitical situation comes in, which was unexpected, which was unfactored in, and now you still have to work, because you can't say, okay, because they don't fit well into this framework, we'll not work with these communities, we'll let them fail. We can't do that. So that's where we do a lot of iteration in terms of, now how do you make it work in current context. So again, it's a lot of
Mm.
stakeholder assessment, a lot of understanding with the community, and bringing in a fine balance that would not disrupt any sentimental or geopolitical challenges, but that would also create some enabling support within that limiting space of work. And that's exactly where we are now. We are just changing, tweaking our strategy, our approach, our business model, making the group more diverse, so that it's just not only one community that becomes the center point because of the geopolitical situations and some change in laws. So that's how we adopt all the time. But again, we are also very flexible with, not complete fluctuation of the vision, but even if you are able to create a prototype of it that works, then you some things are not in your hand. You just have to be very flexible enough for it to let go.
Hmm. That's, I mean, that's the very true, right? Because this is like, sometimes you can fix things, and sometimes you cannot. Like, for example, the first time, this is not many people know this. This is the first time I actually had to shut down a product. It's a tech example, and I was very upset. Like,
Yeah.
it was like we launched something and it went like extremely marketing, tried selling it and couldn't sell it, and we realized that there's a big problem, that the product is not needed like as we were anticipating it, that based on the data we had. And then I had to call the shot and inform the team that, hey, we are going to shut down this product. Because I was young, I was super young. I think I was like 1 year experience
Yeah.
to 1.5 years. So my manager basically told me, Majid, I
Wow.
bless you with this opportunity. And I basically was looking at his face, and then I had to tell the team that, hey, we are going to shut this product down. That was not a good feeling, but I mean, then what we did from there was we took what we learned and then we eventually built up something new. But I mean, it was a product at the end of the day. It was a small software product. And when, if I have to close a project down where I see that I can impact thousands of lives, but then it doesn't go as is, I would feel very sad, right? Because, for example, taking the example that you gave of Jiva, you know, you implemented it in India first, and then you basically, yes, there would have been adaptations according to the local community and so on in Africa. So, and
Yeah.
then if someone, for example, from another country comes to you, Thailand says, "Hey, can you guys actually help us with this?" You can do it again, right? Because you know how it works, you know what are the problems, you can scale it up.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that you are also building systems which are scalable, which are, I mean, adaptations need to be done, regardless software or technology or whatever, but adaptations need to be done. But now coming more towards, because I also want to utilize this episode, so to say, to talk about how individuals, so to say, can contribute. Also, like, how do you think? Because you're seeing what is happening and how what you guys are doing. How can a normal person like myself, who has nothing to do, doesn't work for an NGO, or someone like, for example, one of my friends who actually asked me, forced me to put this question as well, that hey Majid, make sure you ask this question to Yash, because would love to understand how can he, who's sitting somewhere in Germany, normal job, and he has no plans to starting an NGO, and he thinks he cannot start an NGO, actually contribute towards making the world a better place.
So I think we have a very specific program that we conceptualized, I would say, 20 years ago at PYXERA Global, and this program basically started, like at the height of, I would say, the breakdown of Soviet USSR. So basically, countries, Eastern European countries, were economies were opening up from USSR regime to more market-based economy, and rest of the world was figuring out how can they support the transition of these economies with resources, with skill sets that they have, but they, in their day-to-day capacity, they can't go to those countries and do that. But and even if they want to go, they don't have a framework. So that's exactly what PYXERA Global did with those transition in Eastern European countries, by bringing in the top talent from the communities, the corporations in US, in other parts of the world, and bringing them into the local geographies, and working with the system and stakeholders, which otherwise can't afford or have access to those skill sets. So similarly, like your friends, he has certain sets of skill sets which are either non affordable or non-accessible to a lot of NGOs, right? So this whole idea of skill-based volunteering, wherein you work with a NGO, a social enterprise, you design a specific growth challenge project with them, and then a group of individuals, or one or two individuals with that skill sets, come and work with pro bono basis, work with these organizations to help them address their growth challenges with the solutions, the strategies, the technology they need to grow. That is, I think, one very very important way for, I would say, every leader should, at least once in their lifetime, should go through this experience. And PYXERA Global has worked with almost 16,000 corporate executives of 40 of the Fortune major corporations in the world, including some corporations from Germany, and impacted 33,000 such NGOs, social businesses, small government organizations in 110 countries around the world now. So, that's one way to bring in your skill sets, by volunteering in skill based projects. And then there are other ways to build upon it, but I would say the doorway to enter the community world is by bringing your skill sets and matching it with the needs of the organizations that need to scale and grow.
That's good advice, because I see a lot of times what people do is like they end up just giving money to an NGO, never follow up, and I'm like, how do you know they actually use the
Yeah,
money like in the right place? Because if I
exactly.
never heard of an NGO, if I don't know the NGO, like I get a random ad on Instagram, I'm like, they're paying money to run an ad to get money raised, but then I'm questioning, like, does it make sense? Because you can use the 10 euros, 20 euros that you paid for that ad to convert me as someone who gives money,
Yeah,
because maybe I even give less than the amount that was the conversion rate. So does it make sense? Then it's a question mark, right?
yeah,
And then what you mentioned is very very good advice, like for people, like and it actually helps, right, at the end of the day, towards also like NGOs, and also it will contribute and you will feel good, because it's all about finding a purpose, like you said in the beginning, right? Finding a purpose to your life, and finding this,
exactly,
that you are content with your life, right? And with that, I would
exactly.
like to thank you basically for joining in today, Yash, because this has been very inspiring and
Thank
insightful.
you,
I'm
Majid.
super, super happy. This was very different than all the episodes I've done so far. It was we didn't talk about technology, we didn't talk about AI, we talked about social, and we talked about how can people actually do good. But as a closing remark, would you like to share something for the audience?
See, I would really want our audience to one believe that each of us has a role to play to protect our planet, and it can be in different forms, different ways, different shapes, different sizes. So I think first of all it is on us to take that onus that we are equally responsible for the situation of the world, and how our day to day decisions as leaders, as employees, as employers can actually help the transition in a more smoother way. And we can, the way we have created these large capitalist ecosystem, how can we bring that learning and create a more equitable, inclusive and regenerative ecosystem that has space for everyone, because we all deserve to live a dignified life, a healthy life. And we if we are privileged with those resources, how can we bring the position of this privilege with the communities, with the organization, and help them scale the impact that they are doing. And the integrated effort will create the ripples which the world needs in to achieve as a more sustainably developed world for all of us to live a healthy and a good life.
Hmm. Wisely, very wise words. Thank you so much again, Yash. This was, I mean, I don't know how to thank you enough because it was really cool. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I hope you did too.
Majid, I should really thank you because I listen to your podcast, and your guests are super, I would say, talented, dynamic leaders, and this is totally different conversation. So I really admire your leadership to bring in this kind of different voice that also brings to a different flavor to your audience, and give them a different perspective in the choices they make, the options while they are exploring their leadership journey. And also it's just a different flavor. So I really thank you for your leadership to bring a totally different subject. It might be comfortable to few people, it might not be comfortable to few people, but I think that's what brings the best, when you bring all kinds of energies together for a more I would say a picture that has a more holistic perspective.
Very true. Very nicely put. I mean, thank you so much for the kind words. I mean,
Thank you,
I'm very
Majid.
honored.
Pleasure.
To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to the executives. If you found this episode valuable or want to learn more about Pixera, I would mention the link of Pixera, and also would mention the link to connect with Yash via LinkedIn. Meanwhile, if you agree or disagree, leave a comment. I mean, that's what we are here for. We would try to answer them. And don't forget to subscribe and share it with your network. Until next time, this is Majid signing off.